tonight we consider the screen. Often it's tempting to see the future as a place far, far away, but much of the time the technology that we see as part of our future is part of our present. Virtual reality is an example of a technology that up until this year was almost only available to tech developers or early adopters, and now it's in our living rooms or in our art centres. Virtual reality didn't appear from nowhere, however. There's a long history of humans using screens to mediate their experiences of the world, from shadow puppetry to the camera obscura, the photographic plate and the film screen, the computer screen and the pocket screen. We now come to virtual reality space, which in some ways almost seems like it's beyond the screen. The potential of virtual reality seems limitless in many respects, and discussions about it and its use, as with much newfangled technology, is rife with fanatics and critics alike. So tonight we hope to explore what virtual reality might offer creatives and how it might change and be changed by the arts, or the fine arts as we know them. So first up tonight, we have, to give us an introduction to this thing called virtual reality and his experiences with it, we have Mark Schramm from VR Bits, and I'm just going to give people a little bit of your bio, Mark, if you don't mind. I stole this from your website. Mark is a leading developer in the VR industry with over 5 years of development experience and 10 years of experience in software development. He's the founder of VR Bits, which is a content development studio with offices in Australia and Germany, very international. He's also a director and lead developer of Virtual Fireflies, a creative content agency focusing on B2B virtual reality experiences. He's done a bunch of really cool things for manufacturers including Sony, Google, Samsung, HTC, Oculus VR, and he's really great. So, I'd like to introduce you to Mark Schramm.
Thanks for the warm introduction, Elliot. So I've been, as I already mentioned, I've been doing VR for the past 6 years almost now. So that predates the Oculus Rift, DK1, Kickstarter campaign, all those things. So back then I've been doing it in university, where we built our own virtual reality headsets and had a massive mocaping stage and stuff. And it's been great to see how this technology has sort of trickled down into the mainstream market and can now literally be bought by anyone and set up in their living room, or even stuff like it's on your phone. So virtual reality is a massive topic, and that's just going to be a small introduction into it, and some sort of like glances into it. But if you have any more questions about virtual reality, we have a Q&A later, and then also I'll be around, so just ask me anything. So many VR presentations or people talking about VR call it the final medium, and I don't necessarily agree with it. That's why I have the question mark on the slides. And the interesting bit, that doesn't feel no. Okay. So the interesting bit about virtual reality is the sort of the breadth of content that you can make with it. And I myself, I'm an independent game developer and software developer. So I've been doing mostly games for the past 5 years. Also done some other projects, for example, for DFAT here in Canberra. And all those games, they are all sort of different things that I was trying to achieve in VR. Probably the interesting one is Darkfield, sort of in the middle to the left, which was the first game I did, which is sort of a cockpit game where you're in a spaceship, where you're seated. So it's something that with the first Oculus Rift where you couldn't walk around and you had no hand control, it seemed obvious. But then VR became much more than that, and VR is much more than just games. VR goes from education over to medical training, real estate, or sort of virtual tourism, games, entertainment. To basically, it can be used in every facet of our lives, in some better than others. But then all those things, what they have in common is that the VR experience is trying to tell you something. It's trying to show you something, it's trying to educate on a topic. So basically those VR experiences, all VR experiences, are about storytelling. So I'm going to focus on storytelling as part of the VR experience. And storytelling is something, and Ella has started with that as well, that it's now moved from our screen into VR, and it's not that different. But I would even say it starts even way further. That back in the Stone Age, we've been telling stories fireside. And then we started drawing beautiful pictures on rocks to sort of convey that information in a different way. And as time progressed, and technology progressed, we started having new mediums. So we came from sort of the oratory storytelling to hieroglyphs and then paintings. Over to the written word, and then that sort of then later evolved in books, and people were able to read and afford books that were really expensive in the beginning. And then from books we are going further to sort of electronic media, radio, television. And from there we're just evolving into interactive things like computer games. And all those things, they started out with some very practical use to it. Like tell a specific story or print a specific book, print a Bible. The very first computer game, that's Pong and Tetris, they wouldn't be necessarily called art or storytelling. But all those media, they evolved into something that we can just use to tell stories and convey ideas. So computer games for a long time, and probably even now, are not really regarded in art form. But then again, there are games like Life is Strange, which is a deeply emotional game, and I'm not afraid to admit that I cried a lot at the end of that game. So those are things that evolved from a simple idea of a medium and took iterations, and it took years for us to understand how to properly use it. And then we've got virtual reality right now, and that is, I think from my perspective, it's at the stage where Pong and Tetris was. We're at the very beginning, we don't really know what to do with it, and all the stuff that we see right now is of the very first iteration, and I can't wait to see what's like at that end of that iteration. So in virtual reality, we're talking about the promise of presence, and that's what virtual reality sets it apart from another medium. In a book, you can describe a scene of 1,000 words, 1,000,000 words, or 10 million words. But it's always going to be a description of a scene. It's never going to be exactly what the author has imagined. Same with even with a movie where you have to set the perspective onto the scene that the director wants or the videographer wants. Virtual reality is different in the sense that we can put a person in that space. We can show them exactly what we wanted to see, what we wanted the person to see. We can show them exactly what we wanted him to experience. And that feeling of being in a place, not just consciously reminding yourself, hey, this looks pretty real, this is pretty good. No, actually feeling in that space is what we in virtual reality, or what we virtual reality developers call just an example of how strong presence can be. That doesn't seem to work. Okay, anyway, so I'm just gonna describe what that would be. It's a game where on the bottom right you will see the person trying to stick the head through the floor. That's because the person is so convinced that there's a real life hole in the floor in the virtual world, and he's so convinced that it's there, he's going to stick the head through it, and obviously smacks the head on the floor. Just showing how strong presence can be. And the next drift, which also doesn't play, you just maybe reload the page. So this one would be about multiplayer in virtual reality, where you have another person in virtual reality, and he would be with you, and it actually feels like you're in that space. It actually feels like there's another person inside your reach, basically. Okay, so I'm going to go to the previous slide. So that's the interesting one. So it's a game where in that game you're in sort of the false ceiling, so in an office complex, and you've got a person on the right. He's clearly on the living room floor and definitely does not feel like crawling around in a fake ceiling. And he's lifting that tile from there, and obviously wants to look what's underneath it, and then sort of slams the head right into the floor. And that happened to me as well, and that happened to everyone that I talked to who has played that game. Just because in that moment you're so immersed in that environment, there's no doubt that you can stick your hands through that thing, which obviously you can't in real life. And then that's the multiplayer one. Don't worry about that. So that's sort of what virtual reality is right now. It's cute little experiments, and we've got sort of the wide range of hardware from very cheap to probably the better systems and the best systems right now available. And those things, they are all sort of, they're clunky. They look geeky, and when you use them, they look like an idiot. But they're fun. And they are the best proof of concept that virtual reality is more than just a phenomenon. It is something that works, or it's something that you can use. And then with the game experiences right now, they're sort of at that Tetris/Pong level, which is good, which is exactly, I'm not saying as a bad thing, but I'm just saying where we are. So we've got small little games, scope-wise, and interaction-wise. So we've got Space Culture on the left, for example, which is a shooting gallery, basically. And then Job Simulator on the right, which is a very funny and interesting game. So all those games, they are simple and they're fun, again, like Tetris and Pong. And then you've got also creative tools like Tilt Brush, which you have here tonight, and you're happy to give it a go later, which are sort of the first steps into how can we use virtual reality for content creation, for art creation. And then, since that's the present right now, what's the future? What's the future of virtual reality? And interestingly, you can probably look to the past for that one. So that's from Back to the Future 2, where he is probably wearing a virtual reality headset that in that form factor will probably be in the market in 5-6 years, or even earlier maybe. Probably not as sort of cyberpunk looking. But people have been dreaming about virtual reality for a long time, as evidenced by this little clip or screenshot. And then the question of virtual reality is where it's going to lead us, as not just as a content consumer or as a content creator, but sort of in general. And there are sort of several ideas, and some people seem to see very cynical, and they think it's going to be something like this, where everyone is sort of isolated, and people will die in VR because they've been playing it for 48 hours straight and forgot to eat. And yeah, I mean, why not? That could happen. And I guess for some people will end up exactly like this. But then those people have ended up like this without the VR headset anyways. So it's not something like that VR did to them. If those would be the ones playing World of Warcraft for 3 days straight and die. So those are the same kind of people. And that's always going to be a thing. But we also have the other sides of VR, where VR then could be used for teaching children, showing children things that they could never ever possible experience in real life. I think, for example, having a field trip to 18th century London, to Shakespearean time London, and actually see a Shakespeare play while being in that time and have that as a reference. And those are very, very powerful ideas, and I really hope that's going to come. And personally, I believe it's going to be more that optimistic future than what's on the top left. But then, who am I to say it's all going to be probably true? And I'm alluding back to the title, the final medium. I don't really think so. That would imply that it's the last thing we ever do, and it's going to sort of all-encompassing thing. But the same as we're still telling stories by talking to another, the same way we're still printing books and creating movies and creating computer games and all those things, they're all going to be around. Virtual reality is just going to be an additional medium on top of it. And they're all going to be good and they're all going to be bad. And overall, it's probably, right now we have to decide what VR is going to be for us, not for the society or in general, but what we will do with it. And then that's probably all the time I have for it. So the last line, we'll just say thank you. So thank you.